Now, for your consideration, we have data, and there's data on all sides, but this is just should be a nonpartisan discussion about this data. First, in June of 2020, in a podcast with Joe Rogan, an interview podcast with the Joe Rogan, Mr. Osterholm, Dr. Osterholm, whom we all know and respect, said unequivocally that masks do not work, members. Dr. Osterholm, who is now heading up or part of the Biden administration, President-elect Biden's administration for infectious diseases, said in June 2020 on a podcast that masks don't work. The governor implemented a mask mandate sometime in mid-late July of 2020, hoping to stem the spread of the COVID virus. It is quite obvious that that did not work. And now people might debate whether the mask compliance was where it should be. Most people will say when I go into stores, anecdotally, I see almost everybody in a mask. So in spite of what Dr. Osterholm said, masks don't work. We implemented a mask mandate, the governor did in July, all for good intentions, I'm sure. I'm not here to impugn that, just the data, members, just the data. He implemented that. Compliance has been very high. I think if anybody suggests it's not, I think that's not totally straightforward. Finally, so the next thing, we did get a surge in early November. And the governor, a couple weeks later, implemented the pause with the executive order. So in November 2020, there was a study released from Denmark, the Danish mask study. It's easy to find, Google it. I was aware of it a couple weeks ago. The Danish mask study was released, and they found virtually no difference in the masks were not affected. They found virtually no difference between the control group and the group that wore masks in the rate of infection. Now, members, that's just the data. That's a study. Don't yell at me. Go talk to the Danish folks, get the study, look at it, check the graph for the mask mandate and the surge, and you can find, Google Joe Rogan, you can find Joe Rogan, Osterholm interview. So members, if the public or anybody else is angry with me about this, ask them, look at it. So then the confusion is, then if it does not work, what are we doing? Are we going to do things that work, or is it the government's role to continue to do things that don't work? I would suggest that if people want to wear masks, that is perfectly fine, because there are people with immune deficiencies out there that always take precautions about things. Always take precautions. So members, I would urge you to look at the stuff, and then I would also suggest that we take some time to think about that data. Think about that information. Again, a mass study, the surge, Joe Osterholm, Dr. Osterholm. These are just things out there. And what is a citizen or a legislator to do? We just say, well, let's do a mask mandate. Well, the data I see and I have seen is that it doesn't work. Dr. Fauci said it didn't work until he said it did. So consider the data, consider the information, and that's kind of where a lot of citizens are. What good does it do? What are we doing here?
The two medical facts were laid out by Senator Chamberlain on the floor, and I don't want those to remain uncontested on the record. Senator Abler has warned me that when we get into sort of disputing medical literature here on the floor, we lose audience in a big hurry, so I'll keep it very brief. The Danish study that purported to show no benefit from masks did not show that at all. The study showed an 18% decrease in infections of the mask wearer, but it was not statistically significant, so it was inconclusive. It did not measure to see whether masks prevented prevented transmission of the virus from you to somebody else, which is naturally the biggest reason that we wear them here on the floor. So the Danish study is contradicted by numerous recent population studies that show mask mandates decrease transmission and mask penetrance decreases transmission. If we were to grab 10 random infectious disease specialists from across the country, every one of them would come in here and support the validity and usage and safety of masks. Second point would be I have to defend my good friend, Dr. Osterholm, who, if he had the opportunity to speak on his own behalf today, would once again say that he was not fully clear in those June comments. It was early in the pandemic. We have learned, obviously, a great deal more since that time. He has repeatedly advocated since then for universal masking because he knows the science that supports the health benefits of that. So to quote that interview from June is to misrepresent his views on this subject. Thank you, Mr. President.